Hi, welcome to Curious Firefly. There's a free traceable available in my Facebook group, Curious Firefly. I have the outline of the boy and the dog traced out on my paper. My paper is 5.5 by 7.5. This is B watercolor paper. If you want to use masking fluid to go around the boy and the dog, that would be fine too. But it's a pretty simple outline. So if I wet it first, that should work just fine. The paint won't go past the area that's wet. And if a little bit does, it's not a critical matter because the boy and the dog are going to be darker than the sky anyway. And I'm not going to soak this up really good. I'm not going to give it layers and layers of water because we're going to work pretty quickly here. Now this lemon yellow is pretty watery. I didn't give it a ton of time to activate, so it's pretty watery. So we're just going to drop that in there. And maybe a little more color than that. This is Holbein Opera. And we're just gonna, that was actually really straight. If you do a little more wigglies, it tends to look better. Better already. And here I have some purple mixed up. This is Opera Rose and Cerulean Blue. I might put some Cerulean Blue up at the top. Right now I'm just doing the purple. And even though I didn't wet it as much as I sometimes do, I still have plenty of water on the paper here. So we're going to wipe some of it off the edges so it doesn't leak back onto the page and make a mess and make ugly edges. And we're going to blot up any puddles that we see. And now here in the sky, any place we blot has the potential to be a cloud. So we're going to kind of take advantage of that. Now we got some variation in the sky. And I'm going to take some of that purple mixture and we're going to put it right in here. This will make some distant clouds. This paint is pretty watery. It could be a little bit thicker, but it's way off in the distance. So if it diffuses, that's okay. And if it's a little darker than that, that's okay too. Because watercolor does dry lighter. There's my Cerulean Blue. We'll get some darker color in there. This, now where the yellow is, the sun is down here somewhere. We haven't drawn the sun and maybe we won't. But because the sun is down here, the shadows are going to be on the top of the clouds. So we're putting the dark side on the top of the white areas. And that right there. Soft edges and hard edges are fine, but that was kind of one big hard edge. So we fix that. And it's getting to the point where we're going to have to stop messing with it or it's going to go south. Sometimes the trick with watercolor is knowing when to stop. I got a little bit of that purple on here again. Let your painting dry. And while it's drying is a good time to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Okay, our painting is dry now. And now we're going to paint the ground. So I'm just going to wet this a little bit around the boy and the dog. We don't want our poor dog to have green tail, so I'm going around it. This isn't going to take terribly long, so we don't need to soak that up a lot. I think I'm going to start by putting a little bit of yellow, that same lemon yellow, on here, because we are going to see a little bit of the sun shining through there. I'm going to go a little bit of olive green along the horizon there. Yeah, we're just going to kind of streak it here and there. Let's use some of this Viridian. This is a potent green. Oh, it is. No, it isn't Viridian. It's Winsor Green, blue shade, which is pretty much the same as phthalo green. If you have phthalo green, that'll work too. Any dark green right in the front here. This is Sap Green. And it can be streaky, that's okay. We have a little bit of our yellow showing through up here and a little bit of our bluish green showing through down here. And that'll be just fine. Let's just make that a little bit darker right up close to the boy and the dog, because that part will be in shadow. We're going to make that a little darker here. We'll add a little more of this bluish green right here too. Because this is going to be in shadow right here. And we're going to clean up that excess water and paint on the edge. We're going to let that dry. Okay, we're back. The paint is dry. And now we're going to paint the boy and the dog. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of this lemon yellow. And we're going to paint the top of the boy's head. I'm using a number 2 round. This one's by Zen Art. We're going to do the top of his head the lightest because that's where the sun is going to shine. And as we move down, we're just going to pick up a little bit darker colors. This is yellow ochre. And I'm picking up some burnt sienna because the sun isn't shining on the back of his head. And we're going to just kind of mix these colors a little bit right on the painting. Because if we do it on the painting, it doesn't mix as evenly. And that's exactly what we want. We want it to look like it has some variation in color. We're going to let that dry for just a minute. We're going to paint his pants. And we're going to start with Prussian Blue. Prussian Blue is a really intense color. We're just going to paint his little waistline here and where his little legs are under his jacket. And this is a good color for jeans, but if you have another dark blue that you want to use, that's fine too. Or you could make his jeans a different color too. You could do black jeans or brown jeans or whatever makes you happy. And again, this part doesn't have to be nice, smooth strokes. A few brush marks is fine. When we get toward the bottom here, we're going to want this part a little bit darker. Because even though his whole backside is in shadow, it's still going to be darker towards the ground. And now while that dries for a minute, we're going to paint the dog. And we're going to do that a lot like we did his hair. I don't think we're going to start with the lemon yellow as much though. We'll take a little bit of that and then a little of this yellow ochre. Then we'll paint the top of the dog's head. And go around the ears a little bit. And we'll pick up some burnt sienna. And back to some yellow ochre. We want this a little bit darker around the back of the dog's neck, just to give it some shape. And we don't want really smooth strokes for the dog either, because we want it to look like his fur is kind of in locks. So instead of doing long, smooth strokes, I'm just kind of patting the paint on, and that'll give it some variation. Picking up some burnt sienna again, go around the tail a little bit. There again, give it some shape and dimension. And then for the tail, we actually do want the tail to have some wispy strokes. And we don't want to do too many there because they aren't going to show up very much on that green. But maybe when we're done, if it doesn't show up very much, we'll go in with a marker or a colored pencil and maybe draw in a few little wisps if we need it. And now that his hair and his jeans have had a little bit of time to dry, let's pick up a little bit of this burnt sienna again. We're going to start working on his jacket. We'll give him a little brown jacket. And we're going to pick up a little bit of burnt umber too, because we're going to want it a little darker in the back here. And that is really dark. That's okay, we might lighten that up a little bit. Now I'm just taking some of that paint off with a damp brush. It wasn't completely dry, but I'm just cleaning that paint off my brush and then picking up a little more of that real dark brown because that got to be a lot dark. That was a little darker than I intended. And I had a blotch starting there, so we'll just smooth that out a little. All right, we'll go back into that burnt sienna again. And we do want it a little lighter across his shoulders and down his arms. Because again, sun is in front of him and some of that light is going to creep around on the top of his shoulders and a little bit around the back of his arm. So we can get away with a little bit more light there. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of this yellow ochre and work on the back of the dog's head just a little bit. Just to give that a little bit more dimension. And I'm going to call that good. Taking off the tape always makes it look better. Gives it that nice, clean, white border. Happy painting! Thanks for watching.